Welcome to Changing the Game, where bold leaders, rule breakers, and trailblazers drop the playbook and share how they lead, win, and shake things up. Today, I'm joined by Jaclyn Balben. Jaclyn is a former lacrosse player at Babson College who has built her career by deeply understanding herself. From choosing an entrepreneurial, hands-on college environment to navigating startups, large companies, and everything in between, Jaclyn has always been intentional about finding the environments where she can thrive. Now she's the Chief Operating Officer at MD Ally, where she brings that analytical, figure-it-out mindset to scaling impact in healthcare. And I'm so excited to have her here. Welcome, Jaclyn.
Thanks, Jordan. Excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. You've got an impressive resume, so I'm just excited to dive into your background. So I would love if you could just kick it off for our listeners. You were a lacrosse player in college. When you reflect on that time, what was your why? Like, why did you want to play lacrosse? Why Babson? What was that like for you?
Sure. Yeah. So I think, probably similar to a lot of people who grew up playing sports, being an athlete and being part of a team was a huge part of my identity. And, going to college is a big transition. It felt uncomfortable to shed such a big part of my identity while also making such a big transition in life. And so, I really wanted to sort of carry through that component of growing up and sort of the formative years of my life. I think a big part of it also is having a team. So I loved the idea of going to college and having a team that would surround me and that I'd be a part of. Had always been a part of a team. And so extending that opportunity to work and get to know others, and, accomplish hard things with the teammate next to me was just really appealing. Also, I'm a very competitive person and I like opportunities to win and compete. And there's no better sort of forum for that than sports. So a lot of, my personality is tied up in being an athlete. And, when I was looking for the right school to join and be a part of, I combined the opportunity to play a sport with what I understood about myself in terms of how I learned best. So I'm a very, very hands-on learner. I really like to know how things work, sort of from foundation up. And Babson, as a school, sort of encompasses a lot of that just in its core and in its nature. So being an entrepreneurial focused college, it very much starts with you understand the foundations and building blocks of a company and then work your way up from there. And so it felt like a really good fit for me and my learning style.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How did you find out that was that through your research or like going and visiting colleges? You were like, wow, this entrepreneurial program is actually very appealing for me. Is that how you kind of settled in?
Yeah, no, I definitely didn't start with like, let me find schools that do this thing. I wasn't that self-aware. But I looked at a lot of schools. I knew that I wanted to go to a smaller school. That was something that I was self-aware about. The idea of, colleges that were the size of cities was overwhelming to me. So I knew I wanted to go to a smaller school. And as I started to do research and understand, what different schools were focused on and what their specialties and areas of study were, it helped me sort of hone in on what would be a good fit for me. And when I found Babson and learned more about the curriculum and their approach, it just was a really compelling fit. So it was a little bit of, intentional search and a bit of luck.
Yeah, I do think you were probably a lot more intentional than I was at that point in my life. Like you said, I don't know if I was that self-aware, but I mean, you seem very, very much more self-aware than I think I was and a lot of my peers were at that stage. Just like knowing exactly what you were looking for in a college environment and knowing that your career in lacrosse like wasn't going to be the forever thing. I think a lot of athletes really struggle with that. Like I knew volleyball wasn't going to be forever for me, but it still didn't like help make that transition any easier for me. So what was your mindset like when you were moving to like the structure of college and athletics and having a team around you into kind of the uncertainty of what's next in a career?
Yeah, so I did not like that uncertainty. I am someone who likes to have a plan. I usually have a plan, I work the plan. um, when things change, I can adapt, but I like to have a plan. And so I approached getting a job somewhat similar to the way that I had approached getting into college. Um, I sort of defined the characteristics that I was looking for and charted out how to go about, finding the types of roles that would give me the types of characteristics in a job that matched with what I was looking for. I did not graduate at the easiest time. So, I graduated in a tough job market, which made me even more paranoid slash intentional. And so I spent a lot of time sort of thinking about how did I choose Babson as a college? What would I apply to a job search? And one of the things that uh, was sort of really appealed to me were jobs that came with a little bit of like a map, if you will, which is how I ultimately ended up in a management training program. So the idea of moving into a role that had some structure to it, that would give me that hands-on learning environment that I knew that I really thrived in, was just really appealing. And so I looked at a lot of organizations that had those types of programs, and I had the fortunate opportunity to join one of them, which I still think was one of the best decisions that I made for myself personally. Early on, I got a lot of hands-on experience as a manager, that I knew a lot of people who even got to sort of middle and upper management levels and hadn't necessarily seen as many sort of HR and people management scenarios as I had very early on, just because of that type of training program. And it was a really good fit for me because, I build a lot of my sort of confidence out of experience. And so that was something that I knew would work well for me. And so I was very intentional about trying to find that fit.
Yeah, it's kind of like making the most of whatever role you land in and trying to take
Hmm.
soft skills from sports in college into this next chapter and then take what you can out of it. Like you landed in this managerial role or managerial training program role, excuse me. And then at a time where maybe the economy was bad or like it was tough to
Right.
find a job. So like did you kind of feel like, oh, maybe this is the right path for me? Like this will lead me to operations, or were you just like, I just need a job right now. This is just I'm going to make the most of where I'm at. What was your mentality at that point?
Oh yeah, it was definitely a combination of things where it was like, you know, I had certain targets that I wanted to hit, but the number one was I need a job.
Yeah.
Um, and then it was like I had the opportunity to not only have a job when I was graduating, but a job that I felt I was really, really excited about and felt like would be a good fit for me. Um, every day was not amazing. I had a lot of really, really hard days. I graduated in spring, just like everybody does. I had senior week. I was going to bed at like 4 o'clock in the morning. 2 weeks later, I was starting work at 4 o'clock in the
Oh,
morning. There were really rough days. There was
yeah.
like a lot of just like big wake up calls, hard work, grit, that kind of stuff that had to go into it. And definitely needed to lean into like, I'm grateful for the opportunity that I have. I'm going to work as hard as I can to earn the respect of the people that I'm working with and learn every single thing I can from every person that I'm interacting with. So
Mhm.
there was a significant degree of gratitude and humility that went into the first job and the first couple of years in particular.
Where did that emotional maturity come from? Because I know that that is not probably something that a lot of like new grads have. So where did
um, yeah, I think I think there's a piece of me that like my mom has always said that I was like an old soul. So I think there's a little bit of just like it's who I am. But I also think that one of the things that every new grad, everyone going into their first job or their first couple of jobs would benefit from is, certainly you've worked hard to get where you are and you deserve to be treated well and have opportunities and all of those things. You also have to earn those every single day, right? Like the world owes you nothing. And so I think having that mentality, and for most athletes in particular, it's that way. It's like maybe you got recruited to the school you're going to, maybe you didn't. You can still get cut. There's no guarantees you're going to make that roster, that you're going to make it every single day. You can't pass a mile test, you'll get cut. Like if you got a bad attitude, you'll get cut. If you don't show up and play the way you need to play, you're going to be on the bench. And work is that way. The other side of it is also like you show up and you know, work as hard as you can every single day. You've got a great attitude, you control your controllables, and you do all the things that you're supposed to do, and you're going to excel. It's like the lessons that you learn on the field or on the court translate directly into your work life.
Yeah.
And so I think that that mentality is just so critically important. And that sometimes people like struggle to apply what they've grown up doing in their sport to their career. And it's like, that's the last time you ever want to forget. You got to
Yeah.
earn it every day.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's like the world owes you nothing mentality. And I think sports uniquely sets us up for like being able to handle some of those, like the adversity, the challenges that come
Totally.
with work. When you were climbing the ladder or just when you were just moving throughout your career from opportunity to different opportunities, how important was it for you to be around people that felt that same way or had that mentality, or were you kind of able to work through it when you weren't maybe in those types of environments, or maybe you never had that experience? What was that
Yeah,
like?
no. So I would say that so I love working at startups. And uh, candidly, I wouldn't have necessarily thought that to be the case if you asked me, before I joined a startup. I talked a lot about like, I like having a plan. I like working my plan.
Yeah,
I don't like uncertainty. That doesn't like logically necessarily translate to, oh, you'd be a great fit to work at startups,
right.
because it's uncertainty every day. It's a new plan
With
every
no
day.
plan.
Yeah. Yeah. If you think there's a plan, you're probably missing something.
Yeah,
Uh, but I think the biggest reason that I love working at startups is the people that are attracted to that environment. So I find my people when I'm working at a startup, the people who like to move quickly, who like to, get results, who like to collaborate, who um, aren't put off by direct feedback and moving quickly. It's like, if I got a dumb idea, just tell me. Let's fail fast. Let's move forward. So the startup environment for me feels like, my teammates. And in particular for me, I think the healthcare environment in startups is particularly appealing because it combines sort of almost like that competitive, fast-paced atmosphere with people who are also really mission driven. And that's been just sort of an environment that feels like home to me, and is really a good fit. And so, that's something that I've identified, but I identified it by also not doing that and learning
yeah,
those lessons.
yeah, Jaclyn, I'm totally with you. I have very similar experience. I like the startup environment. That's why I work at Shift Group, a company of hustlers, and we're all
Yeah,
athletes and veterans.
exactly.
So you're very familiar with the team here. It's just a different vibe, and
Right.
I think I've been in the opposite environment, just like you have, where it's things move a little bit slower and there's more maybe like bureaucratic layers to things.
Right.
And I think like it just innately, I learned the same way that I knew I didn't like that. And I wanted to be more on this, like connecting with people, hustle, like give me the direct feedback and like operate in ambiguity. But I do think like maybe that's not right for a lot of people. So
Hmm.
how would you encourage candidates who are young in the game to start exploring, is startup culture right for me, or should I start somewhere where maybe there's a little bit more like guardrails to my position?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have a great answer there because for me it was experimental.
Right.
I think it also can change. So I think going to a bigger company for me right out of college was a good move. I learned a lot of foundational skills. I learned how to operate in a corporate environment. I learned how organizations work, which is really, really important. lessons to learn. And I've worked with a lot of people who have gotten to relatively high levels in their career while also not fully understanding how a business works, which is a much more difficult time to learn it. And so I think it's like an answer that can evolve over time, and what's right for you right out of the gates might change. So I think the biggest thing that, or like the biggest uh, lesson that I learned in figuring out where I thrive is that it's okay to be wrong and it's okay to try different things. Like thinking that you have to know like exactly what your right move is the wrong mentality, right? It's like everywhere you go, everything you do, every opportunity you have, you're going to learn a tremendous amount. One of the companies that I felt most uncomfortable with and sort of most out of place and felt like the worst fit for me is still maybe the number one most valuable experience I ever had, because I learned so much stuff that I did not necessarily love learning and didn't necessarily love doing. And I use that knowledge every single day. And so like I think sometimes the pitfall that people fall into is thinking that they have to have it figured out
Yeah.
versus acknowledging and getting comfortable with the fact that it's a journey, and there are going to be a lot of steps along the way, and you can make lateral moves, you can make upward moves, you can make downward moves, and it all can result in an incredibly successful journey, and that there's no perfect path.
Yeah. There really isn't. And I think I've talked about this before, people that act like they have all the answers or they know exactly what they want to do. And I know there's some people out there that are like, yeah, this is my passion, and they know that from an early age and they go after that and fulfill that. I was definitely not one of those people, but it gives me a lot of comfort talking to a lot of people on the show that like nobody really has had it all figured out. Like everyone's just kind of
Yeah,
been like, yeah, I took jobs that I absolutely hated, but like you just said, it taught you the most about what you needed to do in the future, or what not to do
right,
in your next roles. Like I just believe every experience is super valuable.
exactly. Yeah, there's, and it's like maybe it's maybe you learn yeah, like you said, what you don't want to do or what environment isn't great for you, but you built incredible relationships there. You learned lessons that you wouldn't have otherwise learned. It's like if you come into every opportunity with the right attitude and the right mindset, there's value. If
Yeah.
and so it's cliche, but it's like everything is what you make of it.
Yeah.
Um, if you're optimizing for all the time you're spending somewhere, even if you're not loving it, it's like there's value there. Um, and I think thinking about, maybe steps that you wouldn't make again being mistakes is the wrong mentality. It's not a mistake, it's a learning experience. You do it 5 times, like maybe this is a mistake. But but if you do it once, it's like, okay, well, you learn, like if you learned something, it's not a mistake, it's a learning opportunity.
Yeah. If you do it 5 times, you need to learn a little bit faster, I think. That
Yeah. Exactly.
yeah, this is a learning opportunity until it's like, okay, let's maybe process a little bit faster here. Let's not make that mistake.
Right. Yeah, it's like maybe pattern recognition isn't your strong suit.
Yeah.
But
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 maybe
yeah, I think there's too much pressure put on like a
yeah,
perfect path.
totally. Yeah. I think, yeah, find a mentor to help you find that pattern recognition at least. And you actually mentioned relationships and how that's been important in every chapter or every career stop that you've made too. So I guess like how have some mentors played a really impactful role in your career journey? And I'm sure you're a mentor to people as well as a COO. So what are some lessons you've learned, and what do you try to pass on to people that are reporting to you or on your teams?
Yeah, so I like this question a lot because I think one of the greatest unlocks that I had in my career was I had a lot of learning opportunities, that included, working for a company where I, like I said, I learned more than almost any other company, but I also felt I came out of it knowing that it wasn't the best atmosphere and the best fit for me in terms of like size and speed and all of that. Um, I went to another company that was basically like a perfect fit on paper. And all of these were great experiences, but it was like a perfect fit on paper in terms of like the size and the speed and all of these things. And um, I came out of it and thinking about my next role. One of the biggest things that I was seeking was like, okay, there was so much good about that. How could I build on that and make my next opportunity even better? And the thing I focused on the most was I'm going to go find the person for me who is going to help me grow and learn and push me to be better more than anything else that I'm going to optimize for in this job search. And so I spent a lot of time looking for someone that would make me uncomfortable, someone that would push me past, what I necessarily thought that I could do. And I think that's, for me, that was important. I played basketball growing up. I hesitated to take the shot all the time. I would have a shot, I would wait, and I would pass the ball to somebody else. And I wasn't great at taking the shot. And I needed coaches that told me, like, your job on the court is to take the shot. We're a better team when you take the shot. And so that was something that I had thought a lot about. And so one of my greatest unlocks was finding a boss who could be a mentor, who could push me to take the shot. And that was it's hard, but it's something that since that point has been the number one focus that I've had when I've been looking for opportunities is, who is the person that I'm going to work for and engage with the most in this opportunity? And are they going to be the type of, mentor that helps me to grow and succeed and get out of my comfort zone, and to take the shot? And, that had just a tremendous impact on my career, because then when I was ready to step into newer, bigger opportunities that, put me outside my comfort zone, I had someone not only cheering me on, but also opening those doors for me. And so that was a sort of just a tremendous unlock. And so, as I think about paying it forward, that's how I try to sort of like, do my part in the world is, for the people that are working for me or working alongside me, how can I help others take that shot, and know when they should, and also when they take the shot and they miss, reinforce that's like that was the right shot. It's okay that you missed. Like, that's the shot that we need you to take.
Yeah.
And so I think that, knowing that I needed that in my life and my career, sort of successfully finding it and then trying to also be that person for others, um, you know, made a huge impact for me, but then also is like very fulfilling personally when I feel like I can pass some of those similar types of support structures. And, I think the difference between like an ally and a mentor or whatever the case may be is like actually opening the doors. It's like, how do I not only cheer on, but actually open the door, or provide the push through the door if that's what's necessary. So I think mentorship has been incredibly impactful to me, and is something that, I try to also invest considerable time and energy into as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think one thing that really stuck out to me in your answer there was you talked about how it was really important for you to find the person that you wanted to work for, like the boss that would push you to take the shot.
Yeah.
And I think I'm curious about like how you actually went about doing that, because I think a lot of candidates find themselves in a position where maybe they just need to take a job so that they can get the
Hmm.
experience develop. But when they find them, like, I guess at what point in your career were you at when you were able to kind of take a little bit more like charge of that next role because you needed to find that right mentor? Or, was the role or title not as important as the boss at that point? I just kind of want to like, it's kind of a
Yeah.
loaded question. Want to like just really tangibly think about like how were you able to do that while maybe at another point in your career you didn't have the luxury of being able to do that, I guess.
Yeah, no. I mean, there were definitely points in my career where it's like I could not I couldn't have
Yeah.
engineered some of these things. And I think that's where it's like, you know, if you're always working as hard as you can, if you're always like doing all the things that you need to be doing, it's like opportunities present themselves,
Yeah.
more. Um I think one of the things that I really tried to do was I looked for opportunities when I wasn't needing an opportunity, right? So like I didn't go get jobs when I was like I'm desperate to get a job, right? I
Yeah.
I took my time, and that included like, being 110% in on roles where I was, well, you know, being open to the right types of opportunities to find that sort of mentor type person. Because yeah, it's a hard thing to do. I think the other thing that a lot of people could do, and there was a woman on my team who did this really successfully, was even within companies, identifying people and teams that you want to be a part of and figuring out how to work yourself onto those teams or work for those people, right? Like that's a very productive conversation to have internally at different organizations, where it's like, I'd love to be a part of your team someday. What would that look like? Or, what sort of opportunities are there? Because these are some things that I'd love to learn, and I'd love the opportunity to learn under you. There's a lot of ways to figure out how to get what you need in an environment. And also, like, the person that is your mentor doesn't need to be your boss, right? It can be someone who is a peer. It can be someone who you don't work for, but you value. Sometimes that's better, because a manager employee relationship is loaded and has other sort of requirements and restrictions put on it. So sometimes it's better to not work for the person that's your mentor. So there's just a ton of sort of avenues to get that mentorship, and get someone who can advocate for you or help you advocate for yourself. One of the things I mentioned is learning how to navigate a corporation is a skill. It's like having someone who can help with, like, all right, here's how you might approach this type of conversation, or here's when to approach this type of conversation. Something I see all the time, is people bringing up conversations about a promotion right now. And it's like, yeah, that ship sailed. Like, you are late to a merit cycle, and
Right.
understanding sort of like, what are the timelines that companies work on? When do you start having conversations? How do you have productive conversations? That doesn't have to be a boss. And so I think there's a lot of ways to get there. I personally, like I said, spent a lot of time having those conversations, networking with people, figuring out how I might, find the right fit for me, if you will, when I wasn't in a position where I felt like I needed to make a move, but instead could make a move if the right opportunity presented itself.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a good point too. Networking is super important, and I think like you can network with people within your company, or you can try to find a mentor outside of the company, like you mentioned. And how would you encourage someone who doesn't really know where to start on how to make those connections outside of their company? Are you a part of networking member groups, or how should
Mhm.
somebody go authentically find a mentor outside their company?
Yeah, so I am part of groups, in particular some healthcare groups, and then also some sort of like uh, function specific groups. Um, the thing that I've been in formal mentor relationships, and I've been in informal mentor relationships. Formal mentor relationships can be super awkward. um, the thing that has worked the the best for me is having something that I want to accomplish. So asking someone to be your mentor is just like if someone asked me that, I'd be like, maybe. I like,
Yeah.
what, pray tell, are we gonna chat about? If someone said to me like, I'm working to navigate this tough career decision where I'm trying to decide between, a path that might take me on more of like a CMO track versus a CRO track, and I'm trying to figure out how to navigate that and like what type, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm all in. So I think a lot of times mentorship needs to be solving for something and then can develop into something more broad. But particularly if someone is sort of seeking a mentor that isn't necessarily growing out of sort of just an organic relationship, um, starting with a goal to accomplish and something to really sort of coalesce a conversation around feels really important, because otherwise it's sort of just like a elongated getting to know you type
Right.
situation. And so I think that's my probably my biggest recommendation is, if you see someone who maybe has accomplished something specific that you're trying to accomplish, and then you're specifically asking for, insight or, advice or constructive feedback or whatever about that same thing. Um, that's like a tangible thing that a person could latch onto and help with. So that's probably my biggest recommendation in terms of finding those people. I do think that groups and networking events and whatnot are good for that. I've also done, like you listen to podcasts, you see
Yeah.
articles, you see what people are doing, and then using that as a sort of jumping off point. A lot of schools also have good networks to make good connections into. So there's a lot of ways to find people, and I think the way to actually engage productively is to have a goal.
Yeah, I think that's really great tangible advice. Like, actually have a problem that you're trying to solve and approach them with that rather than this ambiguous, "Hey, can we chat? Can I ask you to
Right.
coffee?
Yeah.
What are we gonna talk about?" No, I think that's really great advice, like, actually tangibly bringing a problem and saying, like, "How would you approach this? I need a little training on this." Yeah,
Exactly.
that's so your role now as COO at MDLI, I wanna hear a little bit about that. How did this opportunity present itself, and I guess, where are you most excited about, this role and where the company's going?
Yeah. So I was thrilled and I'm still thrilled to be a part of the MDLI team. I had spent a number of years in startup world, a larger organization, and was really eager to get to build something again. And so I was looking for an opportunity to start at the ground floor and build something with a really passionate and exciting team. And sort of going back to what I was talking about earlier, I also spent a lot of time um, finding a culture of an organization and a CEO that really excited me as sort of the environment that I wanted to work in and the type of team I wanted to work with, and a CEO that I wanted to partner really closely with to build a business and make something out of, sort of elbow grease and hard work. Um, and so, the opportunity to impact patient lives and improve the healthcare delivery system is always, a fun goal. And I would say that at MDLI, it's surrounding myself with those like-minded people who are going to work incredibly hard, who are going to be right beside me, winning and losing together, doing the hard work, is the kind of atmosphere that I love to be a part of. Um, so it's been fun building this together. We are working to change the way that emergency care is delivered to patients in the United States and providing alternate pathways to, a system that's really been around since the 1960s and can't really keep up with demand and doesn't leverage today all the opportunities that we have as technologies have evolved. And so it's a really fun problem to work on, and yeah, impact people's lives positively every day.
Yeah. Yeah, you certainly are impacting people's lives positively every day. Super meaningful work. I love it. Jaclyn, thank you so much. I have one last question for you as we wrap up the show. It's for the namesake of the show, changing the game. What does changing the game mean to you, whether it's in this chapter of your life or your career?
Yeah, I think, to me, changing the game is helping other people figure out how to navigate their own careers really effectively. I love being a team captain. And to me, that means sort of leading, but as part of the pack. So I love working with really smart, hardworking individuals. And when I can help them be more successful, it feels like I've made an impact on the world around me as much as I possibly can. And if I feel like I can sort of leave someone else better than they were before, we engaged, then I've done my part.
Wow. Well, I really appreciate your time and you being a mentor for our listeners on the show today. Where can they connect with you?
LinkedIn's definitely the best spot. I actually read my messages, so feel free to connect with me there.
Yep, I think that's where we connected maybe was LinkedIn. So,
Yeah.
no, I appreciate it, Jaclyn. This has been really awesome. Thank you for joining us and sharing all of your wisdom. And thank you to everyone for listening. I appreciate all of your time, and we'll be back next time.
Thanks, Jordan.